You're with Homes with Joan today, and I'm really excited about today's our show today. We're going to be talking with a home inspector who one of the people I refer to when it gets to home inspection time in the process of purchasing your new home. I will tell you, as a professional real estate agent, this is your number one thing to make sure that you do, no matter what. I know in today's market, people are putting in offers and they're waiving home inspections. I do not ever recommend that. It scares me because remembering that this is your one big investment, you want to make sure you're not emotionally buying, that you're actually paying for an investment that's right. So that all being said, I would like to introduce you to my friend Matt Brumm, home inspection with Brumm Home Inspections. He has done inspections for my clients, but as a licensed agent, if I am asked, I always recommend 3 home inspecting companies. It's your choice. You are the person who is going to purchase your home inspection. It belongs to you. So Matt is definitely on the top of my list of folks that I refer. And he just does a stellar job. All my clients that have used Matt have felt very comfortable with their report, with the questions that he's asked. He always answers them very professionally. So that all being said, Matt,
well,
tell me a little bit about you and what you got
first of all,
going.
thanks, Joan, for having me.
Oh, absolutely.
It's great to see you on
Yeah.
this frigid afternoon.
Yeah.
As Joan was saying, my name is Matt Brumm. I represent a company called Brumm Home Inspection. And I'm in the business of inspecting homes, whether it's a first-time home buyer or somebody who's looking to buy their 5th home, or somebody who's looking for an inspection prior to selling their home. We cover all those bases.
Okay.
Yeah, going to go inside now. Awesome.
Thank you, Matt.
All right, so now we're going to go ahead and start the interior inspection. We took care of the outside earlier. What I typically do is I start in the furthest corner of the home, which in this case is a bedroom. I'm going to work myself in clockwise fashion so I don't miss anything throughout the whole interior, and we'll meet you back here shortly. So we're heading to the bedroom. All right, well now we're into the bedroom. And so the first place I'm looking when I enter a bedroom is I'm looking at the ceiling and the wall to see whether or not we have any water staining, which could be a result of a leak. So I've got a good high-powered flashlight here. I'm taking a look around. Do we have any issues of any water staining, penetration at all? What this flashlight works good at too is if the seller is trying to hide anything, I can really be able to see it with flashing this light here. As I get in and take a look at the ceiling, then I'm looking at the walls. Do we have any cracks, any peeling paint at all? From that point, I'm going to look at the windows. Do the windows open and close properly? So in this instance over here, we have a casement window. I'm going to be opening up both windows, making sure that I'm looking, everything's opening and closing fine on both windows. Making sure too, a lot of times you'll see on older windows, you'll start to see a cloudy residue build up between the window panes, which is a sign of a broken window seal, which really starts to take away of the efficiency of the window as far as keeping heat or cold air out of the home. So I'm looking at that, looks good there. I'm going to come through, I'm going to look at all the outlets. Every single outlet I'm going to look at, making sure the polarity is correct. And so I've got my little tester here, going to come down through here, throw my tester in both of these outlets, making sure that it's properly grounded and that the outlet is fully secure within its casing and there's no movement to it. Making sure there's smoke alarms within the room. As I come through, making sure that the door opens and closes properly. Everything latches appropriately. Making sure there's no loose spots on the flooring at all. Sometimes in older homes, you can find out whether or not there's wood flooring under the floor by finding a corner of carpeting in the closet to pull back to reveal what sometimes is a really nice wood floor that they kept covered. So from here, we've done the other bedrooms. We're going to circle back around and head into the bathroom and see what we've got going on in there. All right, so now we're into the bathroom, and what we're going to look at in here is, do our lights work properly? Do we have a fan that works properly. And we're going to come back to that fan later in the episode, because when we get in the attic, we want to make sure that that fan is vented out through the roof and not blowing moist air into our attic. We have a GFI, or a GFCI, which stands for ground fault circuit interrupter. And so this is constantly measuring current. And so if any water splashes on here, there's a change in current, this will kill power off for safety. So we're going to put our tester on here. We see that we're properly grounded. When I push this button, if it's properly wired, it's going to shut the power off to this outlet, and you'll hear a click, which we did. So we know it's properly wired. We're going to reset that. So we're good there. We're going to kind of make our way here. And I try to be very calculated with my movement throughout a home, just so we don't miss anything, because there's a lot of components to look at. So we're turning the water on, making sure we've got a good flow. We're going underneath here as the water runs for a few minutes, making sure that we don't have any leaking going on. So grab our trusty flashlight, take a look through here, make sure that the trap is properly installed and we've got proper flow, that we don't have backup of water within the sink. We're also making sure that our vanity is fully secure. Sometimes on these flip homes or remods, they'll throw a vanity in and your granite top won't even be connected to the vanity, and the vanity sometimes won't even be connected to the wall. So any movement, you get that bumped, you could distort some of the water supply lines coming into your sink, which could obviously lead to a later leak. At the toilet, flushing the toilet, making sure the flow is proper. We're making sure also that we don't have any movement at our connection point between the base or the flange of the toilet and the flooring. Again, when you look at flip homes or remod homes or do-it-yourself installations, if you have a newer floor that was put in, your floor flange for your toilet should be level with the surface of the flooring. So a lot of times what will happen is a new floor will be put in, that floor flange won't be raised, so having it too low means a plumber may come in or a do-it-yourselfer and they'll double stack the wax ring, which is not wise to do, because that could release the seal between the floor and the toilet as that gets worn down, and any movement can cause that seal to be broken. We want a nice tight seal so water drains and gases drain properly. Through that, we're coming around the corner here looking at a window, another casement window, making sure that this opens and closes properly, that the hinge mechanism is fully intact and that locks appropriately. And then as we turn here, we're looking at the shower now. And so with a tile shower, we're making sure that our grout lines are fully intact. There's no areas where water can get behind. You see we've got a crack over here in the corner. We've got a couple cracks over here. We're going to want to caulk those. Water can be our worst enemy. And so if water gets behind those tiles, it can start to loosen those tiles up, create mildew, create mold, and then we've got a bigger problem. We're making sure our water flow is appropriate, that our hot water is not too hot, and that we have a proper plug for the bathtub. So we have a proper plug for the bathtub, so that way large objects don't get clogged in there, creating more of an issue. Making sure our door opens and closes properly as well, and that the flooring, we don't have any cracks in the grout lines or the tile. That would indicate that the subfloor under the tile may not have been appropriately installed. Everything feels good throughout here, so we're going to kind of walk our way out now, and we'll meet you in the kitchen next. Okay, we've entered the kitchen now, and what we're going to look at in here is start with our appliances. We'll start all of those up, making sure that they're working properly, especially the dishwasher. We'll just put that on a short cycle and continue the inspection, and then when I get to the basement, we can see whether or not we have any leaking going on there. Checking the components of the kitchen sink, making sure that the pull-out wand works properly, water goes on and off. You know, when we have that water running, we're going to be looking underneath here at the garbage disposal and the drain. This house does not have a garbage disposal, most likely because it is on a septic system. So we're looking at water goes on. We're seeing, do we have any leaks at all going on underneath the sink there, making sure that these granite countertops are fully secure. And with a recessed undermount sink like this, we're making sure also that it is properly secure from underneath. Heard stories of people putting pots in here, filling with water, and the sink drops out of the actual slot there. So we're making sure that's fully secure. Again, casement windows, opening these guys up, making sure that they open and close properly, that we don't have any issues with those. With our hinge mechanism. Walking through, also making sure our cabinets open and close and that they're properly secure to the wall. So we're going through each cabinet, giving it just a little wiggle to see, make sure the hinges are all set on here as we're going through. As we get back around the other components or appliances in the kitchen, we're testing the microwave. We're verifying, is this a recirculating microwave or is it an exhaust? We see the exhaust line heading up, and so when we get into the attic, we'll ensure that that is exhausted through the roof and not just blowing warm air into the attic space. As far as the stove goes and the range, it's a gas range here, gas stove. We're going to go ahead and turn the top burners on, making sure those are all turning on appropriately. Turning on the oven, making sure the oven responds appropriately when we turn that on. Going around the counter, making sure that our countertop is fully secure and that our drawers open and close appropriately. When we get the refrigerator, if there's an ice maker and the water, we'll make sure that that's all working properly. Open this guy up, making sure we're good here. Making sure our seal is nice and tight around the doors. And then also making sure that our freezer system has the same nice tight seal around the door as well as we come around. With this being a tile floor, we're looking at areas where there could be cracked grout, any cracked tiles, making sure those get written up in the report as well. And so as we're going through on the report itself, everything is documented. And so when the report is received, everything will be itemized so you know exactly what we went through and what we talked about. And so we're through in the kitchen, on to our next spot, which I believe is going to be the basement. So we'll see you there next. So we're in the basement now. We turned our Nest thermostat to a higher degree to allow our furnace to kick on. Now during a typical home inspection, we'll get the furnace kicked on. I'll remove both panels, both the burn chamber panel and the blower panel, to take a look in there and make sure everything's looking good component-wise. We have a nice blue flame fired up. We don't have any blowback on our flame. And then also we're making sure that our furnace filter is pointing in the right direction. Something super simple that a lot of people don't realize is that when you throw a filter in, they actually come with these handy dandy arrows on them, which are going to show you the direction that needs to be pointing. And so rule of thumb is that arrow should always be pointing towards the furnace unit itself. If you put it in reverse, the filter has a tendency to want to get sucked into the blower, which obviously is not any good. A 1-inch filter like this one here, once every 3 months you're changing that out. We're looking at the components here, making sure we don't have any leaking coming on from the AC portion here. Our condensate lines are properly draining to a floor drain or to a sink, that we don't have any leaking through these joints here. We're looking at the ducting, how our seams, do we have any areas where we have any openings going on both our supply lines and our cold air return. Making sure that we have a proper gas line coming down, that we do have a shutoff on the gas line coming into the furnace itself. We'll also look at, when I take those panels off, I can determine the age of the furnace, so the manufacturing date. So that'll give us a good idea of how much time we have remaining on the lifespan of the furnace. As a home inspector, we don't technically give you have 3 years of life left or 2 years. We're giving you an idea of its overall lifespan. Are you in the beginning stages, the middle, or the end of the lifespan? And so on a typical furnace, you're looking at 20 to 25 years of a lifespan. And so we can determine where we're at in that lifespan. The hot water heater, we're taking a look at this. We're making sure that the components on here are proper. We'll fire this up, making sure that we've got a nice flame. We have a high efficiency hot water heater here, and so we're exhausted through this PVC piping. A couple things to note on this is we want to see our purple primer and our glue attaching for our vents here. Our TPR valve drain line is within 6 inches of the ground. As we look down here, we have a data tag here, which is going to tell us what our born on date here. So this guy here is a 2017. So 5 years old on this. We're typically looking at 12 to 15 years of lifespan on a hot water heater. And again, we would fire this up. We would make sure everything's looking good as far as the flame goes, and that we have a drip leg on the bottom of our gas line, which is required both for your hot water heater and your furnace. Making sure that the overall components are in good working form. So we've finished the really talking about what we're looking for in a furnace and a hot water heater. Next, we're going to go over to, this home actually has a sump pump. So we're going to look at that next and kind of talk about the ins and outs of that and make sure that this one's working correctly. So we'll see you in a bit. All right, so now we're still in the basement. We took a look at our furnace and hot water heater, and this house has a sub pump. And so the way this is designed, as water is allowed to travel through the outside foundation of the walls, it's going to kind of work its way in. Our DNS line that surrounds the perimeter of our basement walls are all angled in this direction. So as water enters in, it's allowed to flow down to the sump pump here. The sump pump has a float on it. As that water reaches that float and pushes it up, the motor kicks on. And so it's going to then take all that water and spit it back outside, hopefully far enough away from the home and not pool against the home. So what I do on these sub pumps, I'll take the cover off. We'll make sure that we've got water in here. And if we do have water in here, we're going to go ahead and raise the float, which this one's got water. So we're going to raise the float up. Make sure it kicks that water out there, which it's doing, and make sure that's properly flowing outside of the home. Making sure too that our lines that are entering into the inside of the crock here don't show any signs of wear and tear or root damage, which could cause a crack somewhere within the flooring, which then could result in a water leak within your basement. Also making sure that we have a plug that's properly located for this to plug into, that there's no use of extension cords. That really goes for all of our appliances. That an extension cord is generally to be used for temporary use only, not to be drawing power on a consistent basis to an area. So I see a lot of homes, they'll have extension cords for the garage door or for a sub pump. That is a big no-no. You want to have an electrician come in, licensed electrician to come in and actually install an outlet to plug those units into. All right, so now we are in the attic, which is generally for me, it's usually the last stop on the inspection train as we go throughout the home inspection. When I get into an attic, a couple of things I'm looking at is one is the access. Where is it located? How easily is it to get the lid off of it? And is the lid fully sealed so we don't have any heat escaping from our living area into the attic? When I get into the attic, I'm also looking at the insulation. What type of insulation is in the attic and the depth of it, so I can determine what the R value is. Now in Michigan here, we're looking for an R value of about 38, even up to about 49. Now R stands for resistance, and so that's telling us what is our resistance to heat as it tries to travel through the insulation itself. So an R38 tells us that we have 38% more resistance to that heat trying to travel through. A lot of times I'll see insulation levels that are way inadequate for the space, which means that we could have an issue of conditioned air from below making its way up into the attic through ceiling lights or through any cutouts or through an access panel that is not properly sealed. As we look through here, we're looking at the roof sheathing. Do we have any signs of any water, any moisture at all? Is there any mold anywhere? When I look for mold, when I come up into an attic, you can kind of tell right away, what does the temperature feel like? Is it breezy at all? You should have air movement throughout your attic, and your air temperature in your attic should be the same temperature as it is outside. So in the winter, it should be cold in here. In the summer, it should be warm in here. If it's the opposite, we know that we're getting conditioned air from our home into our attic space, which is just going to breed moisture and lead to mold and mildew. One of the biggest issues that we find is that if there's lack of ventilation, so if you don't have that airflow through. See, in this house here, we do have some of these baffles set up that create channels for air to flow through from the soffit vents outside through the inside. So we can kind of take a look at this soffit over here we're making sure that our insulation isn't packed into our corners there. And also too, what I like to do is turn the bath fans on before I climb up here. So if I can hear that bath fan, I'll travel back to the sound and make sure it's vented properly out through the roof, so we're not taking that moist air from a bathroom and pushing it into the attic. So that pretty much concludes, and what I typically do is I'll walk around the whole attic. Obviously for this segment we're just kind of staying in one spot here, but I'll walk around the whole attic, making sure I can visibly see all of our bath fans that exit out, and making sure our insulation has the proper R value, and then making sure there are no water spots on the roof sheathing or areas where water could penetrate. So that concludes the attic inspection.
Well, thanks, Matt. It was great to see you walk through the home and see all the work that you put into this. But it doesn't all finish right here. You go home and do a lot of work and put it all together.
Yep.
So from that point forward, I'm just wondering, so what do your services offer to the home buyer? What
Sure.
do you have to offer?
That's a great question. What do I have to offer? Why would somebody choose a home inspector or choose Brumm Home Inspection to come through a home? We said earlier, taking emotion out of the purchase. So one of my jobs that I try to do is really take emotion out of the purchase, have them look at it as a business transaction. Whether you're buying a vehicle or you're going out to eat or whatever it may be, you're researching that item. You're finding as much information as you can about it to become an educated buyer. So the same thing goes for a home. It's the largest purchase that you're going to make. And so why not educate yourself as much as possible about it? And so where I come in is I'm trying to educate that buyer. I'm letting them know, is this a safe home? Are there things that need to be fixed on it? What's the condition of it? And then at the end of the day, they can make a very informed decision whether or not they want to move forward. And so, being able to do that, providing resources and references to them for work that may need to be done, and put them to put them in the best position possible prior to purchasing a home. We talked earlier about going back to the seller and having them make the repairs on it, or concessions, or even walking away. And so, to have a home inspection, like we said at the very top of the hour there, very important to have done. And so my service is, again, take that emotion out. It's a business transaction. Let's look at it at that, and let's learn as much as possible about our home as we can.
I've always said, and I can't believe we haven't gotten to this point yet, you buy a toaster, and how big is that toaster manual that you get? And you buy the biggest investment of your lifetime in most people's cases, and you get what manual? Nothing. So if there's anything close to a home manual, from my perspective, is completely in the hands of a professional, trusted expert in their field. I try to be that to my real estate clients. I try to bring in those folks that surround us and are a part of this partnership. Matt Brumm's Home Inspection has always gotten top reviews from every client that he's had an opportunity to work for. So you want to make sure that you're asking the right questions when you are reaching out to a home inspector. You want to make sure that you understand what services they are providing. Me as the real estate agent is not involved in that transaction. That has happened specifically between the inspector and the purchaser or the seller. So I'm there just as a reference to what I'm hearing, what I'm seeing, how we need to move forward in the purchase. But a home inspector is, I'm going to say it again, one of your biggest and most important investments in your home prior to purchasing it. Some people get a little wary about it because they don't want to spend money on something they don't even know if they're going to move forward with, but it's worth every penny from my experience in working with my clientele. And like Matt said, it's not, when he walks out the door, he's not done with you.
I can't speak for other inspectors. But,
I know. I'm not going to say. So, just a really recent story. He had done an inspection for us, and there was an issue with a deck. And I'm like, this is not my level of expertise. Seriously, deck construction isn't something Joan knows about. So that's where I lean on my other partners in the transaction to say, please help me understand this so I can explain how to move it forward. Matt was right there to pick up the phone and make sure that, he was able to help me walk through that process for the clients as well as the sellers. And we negotiated out a wonderful situation. Matt went back out and took a look at it after the work was done, told us what needed to happen. So when you're interviewing an inspector, I think it's very important as to what do you charge? Number one, what do you charge? What is your services? What's in your report? What do you do after the fact? Can I call on you for other things? Because I think it's about building relationships in our community. And so really make sure when you're interviewing for an inspector that you're really getting some deep dive questions into what their expertise is. And I know Matt is, a certified home inspector. Just make sure that they have that background knowledge, because we all had some people that we know, since home inspections isn't licensed, that there can be some folks out there that say they're a home inspector. Matt, what makes you stand out from other folks?
That's so true that in Michigan, as well as about 38 other states, there's no certification required for home inspectors. so they can make up a business card, say they're a home inspector,
Yep.
and kind of move forward.
Yeah.
I went through certification for it, been doing it now for 7 years, and really do enjoy what I'm doing.
Yeah, and you can tell. You can really tell. And he, he comes out of an attic and he's full of insulation and he's got all these pictures from corners that I don't know. I always say the surprises happen upstairs and downstairs. That's where you're going to find, that is definitely where you're going to find some interesting things,
some of the hidden issues,
the hidden dreams of that house, So it's really important, once again, that you're working with someone you trust, working with someone who picks up the phone, working with someone who gives you a report that you can hold on to and you can see and you can really read through it to understand what's going on with that house. So I think that the education piece of an inspection is the most important. The report is the most important, and then your ability to get a hold of your home inspector. Even a year later, we had a client, that had an issue that Matt had brought up in his inspection report, and he could actually go right back to that inspection report and say, these are some of the things that needed to be addressed, and so you want to keep that inspection report. It's an important piece to the purchase of that home, and if you question it, please do. Right?
Sure,
you want every question you can get from a client.
Oh, definitely. With an inspection, I'd love to say that we find everything, but there are those hidden things. We talked about at the very beginning that it's a non-invasive examination of the home, so we're not busting down walls, looking inside, throughout wiring and whatnot. But we do a very, very thorough job of making sure that we can detect and look at everything that we can possibly find.
And I think it's really important too. And I know people think like, oh, you're going to tell me it's kind of a falsity. Home inspectors aren't code enforcers, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
So they're not your, when you're building a new house, you have an inspector come out and inspect every piece and get the stamp of approval. Really and truly what your home inspector is there to do is to make sure what the condition of the product is, the wear and tear on a product. They're not there to enforce codes, so sellers don't have to worry like, oh my gosh, I have to, I'm going to get, a fine, but we will bring things to our attention that really could be concerning for health and safety reasons. Number one, you need to make sure that home is healthy and it is safe. So that means it's breathing properly. That means it's not growing things it shouldn't be growing.
Right. What I tell people too is, kind of when you walk away from it, it's, you don't want the house of your dreams to become your worst nightmare.
Yeah.
You
wasn't there a movie about that? I think there was a movie about that with
Money Pit.
Danny. Yeah, Danny.
Watch Money Pit.
Yeah. So, I thank you again for being with us today. It's been an absolute pleasure, Matt, having you out here and walking through the house. Great. It's really, once again, one of the first most important things to do when we're on the home purchasing side as well as the home selling side, but really important, one of your first steps is to make sure you get that home inspected. We're grateful for you who took your time today to watch our show, and please, if you ever have any questions, you can reach out to me. I always welcome any of those questions. If you're interested in Matt's information, it'll definitely be shown through the video, so please don't ever hesitate to reach out to Matt if you have other reasons why you would need a home inspector.
Even if there's questions, if you've already had a home inspection and you're wondering about, you can't get a hold of your inspector, and you're wondering for questions on that, feel free. I'm always open for a conversation regarding homes and how I may be able to assist you.
The next time you'll be seeing me, we'll be talking about what is happening in the current mortgage industry. There's been a lot of talks about interest rates coming up, and we have a gentleman, actually a high school friend of mine, that's going to be discussing what's happening in mortgages today. Once again, please feel free to reach out if I can be of any assistance on any part of this, and wishing you all the best. Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, thank you so much, Joan, for having me. This has been great.
Thank you.